Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of The Wake Up. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a great show for you today. We're talking about a lot of stuff. Anything from 30 to 50 feral hogs. You want to get that joke if you're on Twitter. To what's going on with Trump's tax returns. And a little bit about the 2020 campaign, which is starting to get small. And of course, the continuing fallout and coverage surrounding some of the two deadly mass shootings that we had over the weekend. All right, we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But first, we start with 2020. In a campaign where it's getting smaller, folks. It really, really is. Thank God. As Representative Seth Moulton is shedding staff from his long-shot presidential campaign, four sources close to the campaign tell the Washington Post. And the writer specifically there is Paul Kane. And that's going to be very, very interesting because he hasn't quite dropped out yet. But I should really be honest, nothing really surrounding Seth Moulton is interesting. But the fact that he's leaving, I think, is definitely something to be celebrated because there's a benefit. I think there's a little bit of drawback to clearing the field too early from voices that are actually valuable and actually contribute something to what we see on the political stage. Like people like Marianne Williamson, people like Andrew Yang, they bring something to the table. Even someone maybe like, I mean, I'm not going to Steve Bullock any praise, but he can drop out too. But the thing is, Seth Moulton, he brings literally nothing. And I want to read for you now, again, from the Washington Post here, some stats that really show how bad he has been doing as of late. So, campaign spokesperson Matt Cordoni pointed to Moulton's July Federal Election Commission report, which said the campaign was just paying 30 staffers, so it's not great, admitting that some folks had moved on to other opportunities. And he said the campaign has also brought on new staff as well. I highly doubt that. So the exodus comes as the top man, Adnan Mohammed, who's Moulton's deputy national political director, was just named as former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke's national political director, which is rough. Rough for Beto, really, the fact that he is getting a guy that can't really do anything. I mean, maybe it was just Seth Moulton. I mean, you got to kind of give the guy a break because it is Seth Moulton. That's definitely a very tough thing to work with. But still, you gotta maybe you could do probably a little bit better than that Beto O'Rourke. But anyway, so I mean, we get Tim Ryan suspending quote unquote his campaign. Who knows if he'll even ever come back to it to focus on gun violence. I think that's what he said yesterday. But now it looks like Seth Moulton may be the next one to fall. He's yet to qualify. Moulton has for a primary debate. He's barely registered in the polls and garnered an estimated $13,000 in small donors. This dude should just not be running. It's that simple. I mean, he's roughly raised $2 million, is trailing the frontrunners, obviously. About 1/3 of his total comes as a transfer from leftover funds from his previous congressional races. Ooh, that's rough. And another $30,000 is from donors who give extra contributions that can only be used if Moulton wins the 2020 nomination, goes on to challenge Trump in the general election. In terms of funds actually raised this year for the 2020 primary, Moulton has barely cleared $1 million. So it's very rough. The Harvard-educated Marines veteran's bid for the White House comes after leading an unsuccessful campaign to challenge Nancy Pelosi's bid for House Speaker after the November elections. I totally forgot about that. Oh my God. It's so sad because it just shows you how unpopular him and his ideology is. He thought he could challenge Nancy Pelosi, I mean, who is to the left of him ostensibly, but not really. And the fact that he gets away with, again, like these people, Seth Moulton, Tim Ryan, all those people, they get to be the people who are darlings, really, of the media, the people whose ideology is the correct one to win the general election. And they assume that, everyone in Washington assumes that, and by extension, a lot of the country, really, and a lot of the Democratic voter base assumes that. But it's not always true. I would argue it's almost never true, in fact. And they often get criticized, people like AOC, Illinois, for challenging Nancy Pelosi too much when this guy literally challenged Nancy Pelosi for her speakership in a way that no progressive ever has, which is insane. Moulton said to Bob Costa ahead of the first round of primary debates in June, quote, "I'm not looking around doing crazy things, just looking for a viral moment. The case I'm making for the American people is that I'm not a crazy leader. I'm someone that you can trust, and you're not going to agree with me on everything." On whether his bid to challenge Pelosi hurted his 2020 chances, he said, quote, "Nothing could be further from the truth. It makes me a stronger nominee that I was willing to take on our leadership here in Washington, not a weaker nominee." No, not necessarily in the eyes of the party, I wouldn't say. But anyway, Cordoni, this is his campaign manager, tells Power Up that the congressman plans to be at the Marine Platoon reunion this weekend instead of Iowa's Democratic Wingding grassroots fundraiser, where 22 candidates will be speaking, but will spend the following weekend at the Iowa State Fair. I mean, honestly, I spent way too much time talking about Seth Moulton, but it's fun to make fun of someone who is that bad and is that much of a failure. Anyway, let's continue on, shall we? So Trump at the White House is off to visit El Paso and Dayton today, but he won't be welcomed by all. People are signing petitions, planning protests, and in Dayton, organizing a demonstration featuring an inflated baby Trump to express their discontent with the president, whose anti-immigrant rhetoric echoed by a gunman who killed 22 people in El Paso and has, after some really deadly mass shootings, I think, refused to do anything, which, again, is something that should really be inexcusable. But the thing is, the NRA is really the weakest, I think, it's been in modern political history, I think, right now. So that kind of gives the best window for some sort of change if Trump is up to it. I think a lot of Republicans are just kind of up to it. I think for the first time in a long time. So there is some sort of optimism and hope on that front. But yeah, so Maggie Haberman on Twitter, responding, interestingly enough, to Trump's tweet about Beto O'Rourke, saying, quote, "Beto, phony name to indicate Hispanic heritage, O'Rourke, who is embarrassed by my last visit to the great state of Texas where I trounced him and is now even more embarrassed by polling at 1% in the Democratic primary, should respect the victims and law enforcement and be quiet." Maggie Haberman says, "It's healing words and calls for unity like these that are a big factor in why local states prefer Trump stay away tomorrow." So she's got a point there. She's definitely got a point there. Because, I mean, I'm sure he'll say what his advisors have written down on the teleprompters for him, but who knows what could happen, really. Who knows? Because with Trump, it's always a juggernaut. Even when you have the right words written, he can go off script, he can say things that are absolutely awful, and you just want to smack him over the head for it if you're his staff. Anyway, some of the latest on some of the mass investigations going on at this moment. In Gilroy, California, a garlic festival shooting that happened, I think, last week is being investigated as domestic terrorism. Investigators say that they found a 19-year-old gunman had delved into violent ideologies and held a list of possible targets across the country, including major religious institutions, political organizations linked to both major parties, and federal buildings and courthouses. Maybe some sort of anarchist, I don't know. Yeah, but also the Dayton shooter is also being investigated for possible motive. They're expanding the probe into Connor Betts, who targeted a nightlife area in Dayton, bars, clubs, that area. Latino leaders weigh in on authorities' decision to treat the El Paso attack as domestic terrorism, which, thank God. Hispanics in the country are under attack, they say. Black and brown people in this country are under attack. Immigrants in this country are under attack, and President Trump is fanning the flames of hate, division, and bigotry directed at us all, immigrants and U.S. citizens alike. So that's a very clear and strong statement from 39 Latino leaders in an op-ed for the Washington Post. All right, so some of the signees include Ken Salazar, Joaquin Castro, Senator for Popular Democracy Co-Executive Director Cristina Jimenez, Luis Miranda, and his son, the board chair of the Latino Victory Fund. So, yeah. interestingly enough, outside the Beltway, California is creating a law that makes President Trump show his tax returns if he wants to be on the ballot there. And boy, are they not happy about that. Trump and the Republican National Committee filed 2 lawsuits Tuesday against California officials challenging a new law that would bar Trump from appearing on the state's primary ballot next year if he declines to disclose his tax returns. The RNC suit, which includes the California Republican Party as a plaintiff, alleges a naked political attack against the sitting president of the United States. And, of course, Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor, responds, "There's an easy fix for you, Mr. President. Just release those tax returns of all the precedent of every president since 1973. Interesting enough, there has been a new new data released about some of the donors, the small donor Democratic donors. A lot of them like multiple candidates, which is interesting. About 1/5 of the Democratic donors have given to multiple candidates, suggesting they haven't settled on a field in a crowded, settled on a favorite in a crowded field of presidential contenders. Many of the 2.3 billion, more than 2.3 million people actually made small dollar donations of $200 or less to presidential candidates in the first half of the year. Senator Bernie Sanders, no surprise, had the most loyal donors, which makes a lot of sense because his campaign is the most different from any other campaign. That's not even a bias statement, it's just kind of a fact at this point. Andrew Yang followed close behind. He has a pretty strong base as well. Former Housing Secretary, former HUD Secretary Julian Castro and Senator Cory Booker had the least loyal donors. For each, about 60% of their donors gave to other candidates as well. Interestingly enough, this is no surprise here. The top polling candidates, Senator Elizabeth Warren seems to be in a prime position in terms of crossover appeal. Sanders leads the field with small donors, obviously, with a total of more than 747,000, with Warren next in line, way behind at 411,000. Good news for Warren, though, is she trends upwards in the polls. She shares 60,000 donors with Sanders and another 61,000 donors with Kamala Harris. So she really is the compromised candidate for sure. Also, rest in peace now to Toni Morrison, the incredible black novelist who died yesterday. That a black woman should write the greatest novel of the 20th century is a glorious rebuke to the long history that denigrated women and African Americans. Ron Charles wrote for the post of Morrison's novel Beloved. With the blessing of reading Morrison as she was writing, others will have the blessing of rediscovering her. The first African American woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, Miss Morrison was the author of 11 novels, as well as celebrated children's books and essay collections. Among them were works like The Song of Solomon, which received the National Book Critics Circle Award in 1977, and Beloved, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988. Again, in the New York Times, from the New York Times, Margaret Fox. In awarding the Nobel, the Swedish Academy cited her novels characterized by visionary force and poetic import, though which she gives an essential life to an essential aspect of American reality. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff. Authors, editors, artists paid tribute from all around the world. So, from people like Shimanda Ngozi Adichie, Henry Louis Gates Jr., Fran Lebowitz, Margaret Atwood, Jesmond Ward, Lauren Christensen, the New York Times spoke to all of them for an article that's definitely, I think, worth reading. This is quote here, so our last quote of the day here on the Wake Up. That's from Morrison herself in her Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1993. The vitality of language lies in its ability to limn the actual, imagined, and possible lives of speakers, readers, and writers. Although its poise is sometimes in displacing experience, it is not a substitute for it. It arcs toward the place where meaning may lie. This has been The Wake Up. We'll see you tomorrow.